Have you heard about the Detroit Water Project? This initiative was created by Tiffany Ashley Bell and Christy Thielman to answer an extremely large community need as families and many other at risk groups had their water shut off in Detroit several years ago. A direct quote from Tiffany about the situation, if you're not familiar. It turns out that this whole water crisis thing goes back a while. In the city of Detroit, the water company is the only one thing that still brings in money every month. There are a lot of people who still pay consistently, but the city has taken out billions in bonds, so they owe Wall Street a lot of money. They see the water company as the only place to try to get that money back. Once you're behind on your bill for 2 months and the water has been shut off, there's a $30 reconnection fee to turn it back on. If you're already behind on your bill, though, there's a chance that you can't afford that, end quote. Tiffany figured out a way for me and you to give money directly to unpaid water bills so that those without this basic human right have clean water. They wrote postcards and canvassed people on the ground once they figured out that it's possible to take direct action. In the first 16 months, the project helped 950 families in Detroit. Today, it's now the human utility, with Tiffany at the helm, with the same mission plus additional locations, including my hometown in Baltimore. Tiffany has also evolved to fighting for policy change at the root. This is an example of a mutual aid project where people come together to help others who are directly affected because
No one
no
is
one is
saving
saving
us
us
but
but
us.
us. I'm Paris. I am a CNCF governing board member representing Kubernetes. And I also sit on the Kubernetes steering committee.
I'm Tabitha. I am one of the chairs of Kubernetes SIG Security and a member of its Security Response Committee. So let's think a little bit about life as maintainers. Do we always easily pay our project's utility bills? Do we always find plenty of folks eager with time and energy to show up and do the work of building and maintaining our open source software? Let's look a little bit at some recent history. 2006, the dunk tank effort to fund the Debian Etch release. 2009, Capistrano core developer quits the project abruptly, leaves a note online explaining to us the situation that caused him to have to quit. 2011, a kernel developer that you might have argued with on a mailing list yourself gives an interview on the internet explaining that his opinion is one of the core Linux distro vendors' business decision is not to contribute. 2014, an open source project that you probably use every day, has just finished a year-long fundraising effort to get $20,000 to pay the electric bill for its self-hosted build infrastructure. That same year, the OpenStack Technical Committee is forced to address unsustainable project growth with insufficient infrastructure support from its member companies. 2015, when the core developers of Hypothesis project quits the project abruptly, leaves a note online explaining to us the situation that forced him out. I could keep going with examples, but let's skip forward to today.
This happens in our own ecosystem and community. That's right. These are open source issues and not an us or them problem, but a matter for us to solve together. In Kubernetes, we ask for full-time headcount in places that don't see productized feature development, like testing, infrastructure, docs, and community. Heck, we even ask for them in those other places too. SCD also has a need for full-time maintainers to shepherd all of that, including features. Their community isn't as large as Kubernetes to distribute the load, but they're raising flags and asking for help. After several months and even years of asking, though, etcd still needs more maintainers. Kubernetes still needs more testing support, just as one example. But we carry on until we break down. The proof can be found online over the years, as you heard in the brief history that Tabitha presented. There are a ton more examples, and I'm sure as you're listening to this, you have others in mind. We could do a whole talk here. But there were some notable clusters of years that received a lot of press or hot takes in blogs or other mediums, many of which surrounded security incidents and other open source natural disasters like Log4j, Heartbleed, and more. They strain our time and energy, breaking down our ability to engage at the same level as before. Sometimes we advocate for change with blog posts and conference talks like this one, and even fundraising campaigns. Sometimes we just walk away.
But I'm really tired of seeing my friends and colleagues break down or walk away. In principle, some of these open source software natural disasters can be prevented with more support, like the shocking loss of a solo maintainer. Others, like the onset of a global pandemic or the stress of responding to a major security incident that's all over the news, are totally out of our control. But how can we prepare to support each other better when they do happen? How can we be inspired by the success of mutual aid projects like the Human Utility? How can we come together in new ways to support each other through both everyday stresses and open source disasters alike? Paris and I have been reflecting on our time in both open source and local communities, and we'd like to share some thoughts about mutual aid and two broad categories of actions that we have seen improve the lives of our colleagues and our friends.
The first step in building any kind of mutual aid project and changing things is understanding the structures around you. Dean Spade, a lawyer and activist, lists 3 key elements of mutual aid in his latest book about building these programs in times of crisis. The first such element, knowing why you aren't getting what you need, is a crucial first step to getting it. Knowledge is power. As a future or current maintainer, how do these power structures around you work? Who do you ask for help for resources? And what do they do with that request? Who makes decisions about the priority of your needs? For instance, how does your project's top governing body hear and take action on those needs? How do they interact with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation? Step farther, how does the CNCF work? The foundation itself offers services to maintainers like paid security audits, cloud credits, design services, and other programs that many open source foundations don't offer. But do you know how to get them? Do they offer what you and your project need? What about legal counsel in the time of an export control issue? Or does that require your own attorney? Who holds the insurance for when leaders get into code of conduct lawsuits? These are things you probably don't think about as a maintainer until you need them. So how do you escalate when those needs aren't being met? There's multiple bodies at play here that range from the Technical Oversight Committee to the Governing Board. CNCF projects have governing board reps that take your escalated needs in the form of risks, opportunities, and updates. The governing board is comprised of the largest donors to CNCF, and they approve budgets that are set by the CNCF staff and hear license matters and more. I'm the rep for Kubernetes, Richard Hartman for other CNCF projects. Reach out to us for anything. And what about the orgs that we're asking things from? Notoriously full-time engineering support. How do they work? Well, businesses invest money to gain value or reduce risk. How does your employer approve headcount now? What's the value for them hiring someone specifically for the project? Examples, do they want to get their desired features into upstream? Do they want the reputational benefits supporting open source? Do they want to raise leaders? Are they worried about the future of tech that they depend on because of the security incidents that we've reviewed earlier? How much does the support you want cost them? It's been my experience that it's a lot easier for business to write an expense in the form of a check than headcount with benefits. They're 2 different accounting items. Understanding these power structures reduces time wasted asking for things that you won't get. It lets you set your expectations appropriately, and it helps you ask in ways that will be heard and acted on. All of this is power.
Let's make that all a little bit more concrete then. Remember that the leaders of a company fundamentally need to make money. That means growing revenue, shrinking cost, and managing risk. If you look at us, open source, that's us. We're cost and risk. So the optimum short-term plan is to provide the lowest amount of practical support. Not every leader or every company is so ruthless as that. But even generous, really intentional ones have to contend with those forces every day. This means that full-time staffing only happens when somebody personally sees the value and advocates for it within their reporting chain. It's tremendously difficult to do. So even when full-time staffing is promised, that investment needs to be constantly re-justified, and it can go away without warning. It's a lot easier to justify making space in an existing team's calendar for part-time upstream work, for filing bug reports, for upstreaming patches instead of carrying them in an internal fork. And those kinds of contributions are super valuable, but we can't expect them to make all of our problems disappear. Even as individuals, we need to recognize that no one of us can carry our project single-handedly. Like, I get it. I work with so many project maintainers. I know that most of us are brilliant, passionate, and we even live happily without sleep. But we're still not enough. Our projects are too big for that. Your hardworking brilliance can hurt up-and-coming new contributors. They see the superhuman efforts of the project heroes, and they know they could never equal it. The project heroes' prolific fixes can starve new contributors of good first issues. You really can't save a project yourself, but you can hurt it really badly by trying. So, kind of thinking about this, do we want to persist in making these heroic individual efforts? Do we want to keep asking the businesses around us for help and being angry if it doesn't come or disappointed when it goes away? I want better than that for us.
Yeah, so instead of being mad, let's mobilize our people, expand solidarity, and build movements. We can do this by holding space for each other's joy and pain. We can share stories and learn from each other. One such group that we have for this is Maintainer Circle amongst all of the cloud native maintainers. With more than 1,000 maintainers within CNCF projects and billions of dollars in this industry, we have the power if we come together to use it. This is a mutual aid project in and itself. I created this group, but I'm not the leader. The intentions here were not to be led by one person, but by all of us as a shared resource. We are all leaders. Since the group's inception, we've brought in speakers to do deep dives on requested subjects like burnout and code reviewer growth. What about topics like asking for support success stories or helping each other to clearly articulate our needs? Join the group on the CNCF Slack with the same name and start hosting your own circles. So let's sum up a little bit of the elements that we've just learned about mutual aid. 1, knowing the structures and understanding how to put that into action. 2, saviors continue the cycle versus break it, which is really what we need. And 3, holding space for each other is key, like a maintainer circle. So the first rule that Tabitha and I have seen work is saving yourself. As a future or current maintainer, a healthy and not overwhelmed you is doing what's best for you and the project. Burnout is a topic that we hear too frequently in many industry circles. You might even hear some say project first. And no, it's you first. You can't pour from an empty cup, fill it up. So how can we start saving ourselves? Well, we can start by writing down what we do and thinking about onboarding more people before you need them. Many maintainers always ask me, Paris, how is this really going to help me? It sounds like busy work. And you know what? By the time you're overwhelmed, it is going to be a lot like busy work. If that's the case, though, and you are overwhelmed, you should stop the regular work to focus on onboarding the people who can help you. People can't help until we understand the job. It's how you grow contributors, and it's what you can point to when the current maintainers of your project, or maybe even your dependencies or the entire ecosystem, can jump in and understand what the phrase jump in really means. Help wanted tags are a proven good way for folks to jump in on tactical issues and PRs, but I'd encourage you to think a lot bigger. I don't often see requests for new maintainers documented publicly, for instance, in issues. The people you don't ask can't help. So, what other needs are you struggling with? That seems like an intense word, struggle. But we don't need to let it get to a disaster. And if it is, though, don't be ashamed to say what's going on, because suffering in silence or behind closed doors begets more suffering. Be loud and be public. This is one of my biggest regrets in the Kubernetes project. Why? Because my role as GB member focuses almost solely behind closed doors, because that's how it works. When I bring issues to the table, like needing more support or funding for an area, it's usually their first time hearing about it. This doesn't help our cause. What helps is detailed issues and annual reports stating what we need, and most importantly, what happens when we don't get it. I've been advocating for CNCF budget transparency, more participation from member companies, funding for our infrastructure, and legal support for our committee members, among many other things. But guess what? It's not all drab. A success story is in Kubernetes SIG docs, where they clearly asked for new leadership by using their mailing list and the 5,000 plus person Kubernetes developer mailing list, which is a general list, and multiple other channels like Twitter that includes millions of eyeballs to recruit and group mentor folks into the leadership roles that they needed. They really got the word out. Moral of the story is to start using the mailing list. Get the word out. And when the struggle is too much, or when you're ready for new or exciting opportunities, it's time for emeritus. The word emeritus is an honor. It's an aspiring level and can be used no matter what the situation is. Consider this the top of your contributor ladder that should be achieved so others can grow behind you. If you have this mentality from the start, it's easier to save yourself and grow others. Even your CI will thank you for not needing to send you reminder PRs to review. Be an example for others. Show them a positive outlook. So many people look up to you.
The next rule that we've seen work in our friends and colleagues' lives is really the next step in the process. Lift each other up. That means when your cup is full, then share from it. This is really an opportunity for us to practice our empathy for each other and practice using consent with each other, because we have to meet each other where we are. The right approach to help someone depends on their situation. So sometimes the help that is being asked for is really clear. In open source, there might be help wanted issues. There might be an email spelling out exactly what difficulties are. And in those cases, then you have that request for help. In other times, it's not so clear. Maybe you know someone is struggling privately but keeping on a brave face in public. Or maybe a project that you are close to has issues or pull requests piling up. You see that they're not advancing. The right approach is going to differ between these situations, so let's break them down one by one. This is more straightforward when there is a clear ask for help. Contributors and maintainers are the best ones to be able to say what they need, because people on the ground know best. We're describing our own lives and experiences. So that means when someone is asking you for help, you can do it. They're telling you how to. Believe them, and don't let your fear of being imperfect stop you. If the job is well documented, like we were talking about before, then so much the better. It's easier for new or experienced contributors to step in and help. But even when the documentation is lacking, if there's a specific request, then you know that the folks who have asked for that help, they've thought about it carefully, they know what they need, and they've spelled it out for you. So believe them and step in to do it. You can't always help everything directly, so boost the signal. Use your voice. Like, for example, how many people have you told about the difficulties that etcd is facing? How many people have I told about the difficulties in etcd? It's been some, but I know it's not as many as I would have liked. The other situation gets a little more difficult. So in that case, when you know there's a struggle, but there's not really a request for help, maybe someone isn't even able to say that they need help. In that case, you really need to focus on your empathy and your consent. As a maintainer or as a contributor, you know what's overwhelming to you. So think about those things that are overwhelming and bothersome to you in the context of the project that you see as struggling. Consider that from their point of view, and then ask for their permission to help in ways that you think you would want help if it was you. That might mean asking, hey, would it be helpful to you if I came through some of these pull requests and gave them a first pass of review for general quality and whether they seem to address the issue? Might be saying, do you mind if I go through the issue backlog and triage them into the categories that you use? Would you like that? Would it be helpful? One thing that's a common problem for all sorts of open source maintainers is continuing to schedule and facilitate project meetings, taking the notes in those meetings, and those sorts of administrative tasks. Especially when a project is struggling, those can be a really powerful way to help because it can free up the real domain experts who need to scale themselves to focus on getting the information that they know shared with others in meetings that maybe you can offer to facilitate for them. So, in general, when there is this kind of struggle, you can think about what would be good for you and ask if they would like that. And it's easier to say, yeah, please do that, than it is, sometimes, to think about what you need and list it out. So, to really bring this all back together, we can stop struggling alone. We can create communities of care by asking each other for help when we need it, by offering each other help when we can, and by using our voices. We can use the power of our knowledge to get more practical assistance from the companies and organizations around us. The opening keynote from KubeCon on Wednesday offered great promises of support for CNCF projects. We can connect those promises to the actual needs that we know we have, and we can follow up to ensure that that support is truly helping. No hero can come and save us, but we can save ourselves together. We take care of us.
Thank you so much. One more time on Paris.
I'm Tabitha. I'm so grateful for the time that you've taken to watch this presentation. Now go and take care of yourself. Go and take care of your colleagues. Thanks again.